Good evening. Hope you are all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Succah, Daf Kaf Hey, and we're starting at a Mishnah about a quarter of the way down, a new Mishnah. And while this Mishnah does have what to do with Sukkah, we'll be speaking more globally about a very important idea, and that is that as the Mishnah opens here, Shluchei mitzvah pturin mina Sukkah. If you are involved in doing a particular mitzvah, so then you are going to be pater. Rashi here on the Mishnah, Rashi is a little more than halfway down at the opening of the new Mishnah. He writes, Dimor abaschel shluchei mitzvah, holchei baderech mitzvah, kegon lilmod Torah, ulahakbil pnei rabo, veliftos shvuyim. An interesting conglomerate of mitzvos. Why not every other of the Ramach mitzvos that are mitzvos aseh? Okay, good. Omer Dorsheni. What?
Why is it a chiddush anyway?
Why is what a chiddush?
What is it? What's the language?
The question is why did Rashi select these three? It's
No,
not.
my question is why did the Mishnah mention it? We know that already.
How do you know that?
How do you know that? That's the Gemara today. That's what the Gemara is going to analyze with two different approaches. You're under the assumption that you know it from elsewhere. This is where we know it from. This is the primary Marimakom. So that's the
chart of mitzvahs that we go in order.
So that's the first din of the Mishnah, which is that shluchei mitzvah p'turin mina sukkah. L'dugma, let's say that I have to drive to a bris and it's very, very far on one of the days of sukkah. So I can eat without a sukkah on those particular, even Rashi doesn't say that mitzvah, but l'chora, any mitzvah I say would be the case. It's shluchei mitzvah. I have no way to eat in a sukkah. What am I supposed to do? Okay, so you go grab food in a gas station, or if you're healthy, you bring fruit or something like that. Or you get food in a gas station, and then you eat it in the car, and everything is fine because shluchei mitzvah p'tur mina sukkah. And as well, din number 2, cholin sham shehen p'tur mina sukkah. If there are people who are ill, of course they're pater from sukkah. Chola, that's obvious. The chiddush of the Mishnah in case number 2 here is sham shehen. Even the people who are tethered to them in that they are the caretakers, they as well are pater from eating in a sukkah. And lastly, Ochlin v'shosin arai chutz sukkah. The third din of our Mishnah, not connected to the others, other than it's categorically in regards to what is not required to be in a sukkah. But the third din of the Mishnah is that one can eat and drink arai outside of the sukkah, and that we'll learn some of these dinim as we move along. So asks the question the text was just asking, how do we know that there's a din of shluchei mitzvah p'tur mina sukkah? So says the Gemara, there are two different approaches. Here's approach number 1. Titanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us in the psukim of Kriyas Shema, v'shivtecha b'veisecha. And what do these words mean? Prat le'osek b'mitzvah. You have to say Shema when you're shivtecha b'veisecha, when you're sitting in your home, when you are sitting in your home, except for those who are osek b'mitzvah. What does uvelechtecha v'derech mean? Says the Gemara, prat lechasan. What is that? Why did you separate those two? The previous one said prat le'osek b'mitzvah, and then uvelechtecha v'derech means prat lechasan. Why did you do that? So there's a gorgeous Rashi here. This Rashi is the first of the long lines, at least in my layout of the Gemara here. Dibur hamaschil uvelechtecha v'derech. Prat lechasan, and Rashi has a little bit of an arichus. We're going to learn it because it's beautiful. And Rashi makes the following distinctions: V'afal gav dehunami b'mitzvah tari. The chasan is also being involved in a mitzvah. What was the first part of the drasha that we said in the brisa? We said b'shivtecha b'veisecha prat leosek b'mitzvah, and then you later delineated a chasan. Why did you do that? We really needed both parts of the pasuk. The part of the pasuk of b'shivtecha b'veisecha, which excludes people from the mitzvah of from any mitzvah when they're involved in another mitzvah, and as well the din of a chasan. The ihava kasav chad, if there was only one of them, kevan de chasan la behed yaksiv bekra. That really there's no pasuk in Chumash that says anything about a chasan at all. Havamina lo pater akasuv ela toreach ve'osem meleches mitzvah biyadayim o mahalach lemitzvah. That the only exemption is someone who is being osek biyadayim in a mitzvah. Right now, I'm traveling to mitzvah X. I'm working on pidyon shvuyim. Fine. But the chasan is not being osek b'mitzvah, he's tarud b'mitzvah. He could be doing nothing, but he's tarud. So that's a huge chakir. It's a little surprising the Gemara doesn't bring this thing. We'll see it a little bit later. The Gemara does, but it's strange the Gemara doesn't bring it here. But Rashi goes through this as well. Aval chasan, continues Rashi, 4th line of the middle width lines. Aval chasan shu yoshevu batel ve'eno osek. He's not doing anything. Elatar b'machshava b'machsheves be'ila lo pater akasuv. Yeah, the mitzvah of tashmish hamita is a mitzvah d'oraisa under certain circumstances, then it's not a pashut mitzvah. Fine. Hilkach mikra yisei rashmina depater mikrishma detar b'machsheves be'ila. Just the machshava of the mitzvah of Tashmish Amita under those circumstances with the Basula, as we will see shortly. So then he is Pater, even though he is not doing anything biyadayim, nothing. He is totally sitting still. Nothing's happening. He's not walking. All he's doing is thinking, and the thinking alone is enough to create for a tirda. So says the Gemara, Mikan Amru, from this drasha of Prat Lechasan, we've learned the following distinction. Akones es habasula. If one enters into marriage with the basula, so then pater, he's going to be exempt from the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. V'eso almana chayiv. But a woman who has already been married, so then the tirda, the mitzvah is different for a woman who has already been married, and therefore chayiv, he would be obligated to keep to say Shema even on that night when they are wed. So says the Gemara, "My mashma." How do we understand all of these drashas? So Amar Rav Huna ki derech, or ki derech, as some of the Gemaras have it, from the words of Alechta Chabaderech, ma derech reshus. Just like when a person goes out of their house, I want to go somewhere, so they choose to go somewhere. Today I went to my in-laws for a barbecue. I chose to go there. I actually didn't choose to go there. I was told I was going there. I didn't really choose anything, but let's be under the assumption for just a moment that there was some autonomy. So then, hi Rachie, I love you very much. So then, ma derech reshus. I'm going to stop talking now. Ma derech reshus, just like when a person leaves their house. I gotta. Amelus. Ma derech reshus, just like when a person leaves their house, they get to choose. Af kol reshus, and any other time. That's true. La fuke, to exclude haydib mitzvah asuk. If a person leaves their house for their own choice, they're making a decision on their own. They're a chayv in all mitzvahs. But if you're leaving your house because of a mitzvah, so then halacha l'maaseh you'd be pater. So says the Gemara, that can't be pshat in the pasuk. Milo askinan. Who says that's what the pasuk is talking about when it says uvulechta chavaderech? Maybe pshat in the pasuk is milo askinan to ka'azil dvar mitzvah. Maybe when the pasuk says uvulechta chavaderech, it's not talking about leaving your house for something that's a rishus. Maybe it's talking about leaving your house for something that's a mitzvah. And still the Torah says you should say Shema. Says the Gemara, no, you can't say that. In Cain, if that were to be true, if we were to assume uvelechta chavaderech meant that you were leaving your house to do a mitzvah, so then lemakra b'sheves uveleches. It should have had a different language. Why did it say b'shivtecha baderech, right? Why would it say that? What is it? Where are we here? B'shivtecha b'veisecha uvelechtecha baderech. Why does it say b'shivtecha uvelechtecha? Identifying the you part. So says the Gemara, "My b'shivtecha v'lechtecha b'leches didachu demechayebes." When the walking is motivated by your own volitions, then of course you're going to be chayev, obviously. But habeleches de mitzvah b'tiras. That's where you're going to have the exemption. Says the Gemara, if that's true, well, there's still tirda de mitzvah of some degree with an almana. Afilu kones es almana nami. It should still be the case that when one marries a woman who's already been married, so then the halacha should be that he should still have tirda de mitzvah. He should still be pater from the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. Says the Gemara, there is a difference between them. Kones es habasula tarid, kones almana lo tarid. There's a greater level of tirda with a basula when one marries a basula, and that's different than when one marries an almana. So says the Gemara, the tirda alone is sufficient to create a ptur. V'chol heicha de tarid. Under all circumstances, when you feel tirda, I feel stress. We all feel stress many times of the day, many nights of the year. So on all of those nights, we're going to be pater from the mitzvah of Shema. Tirda alone is tirda. Let's ask the question halachically: is being tarud enough of a reason to not be chayav mitzvahs? What if I'm tarud because of a totally non-religious issue? I have an anxious day. I feel tarid. I'm pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah. I'm pater from the mitzvah of Shema. How can that be? It says the Gemara, "B'chol heicha de tarid, hachanami de pater." Is tirda alone in a vacuum enough? Tirda alone enough to say that you're going to be pater. I was just remembering that. Okay, on to the. It says the Gemara, the tirda can't be enough. Elameata, if tirda alone is enough, then tavas finaso bayam. Let's say that a person hears, oh, there's a big hole in your boat. It's sinking. So now he feels his yacht was millions of dollars. He hears now on Shabbos afternoon, or let's say Shabbos morning before Shema, he hears that his whole boat is in the middle of sinking, loaded up with water. So should we say he's pater hachanami de pater b'chitem hachanami? And if you want to say that maybe this guy Taka should be pater because of tirda, I'll give you a case that you can't argue. V'ha'amar Rav Abba bar Zavda amar Rav, and we will speak about him in more length for the rest of the day after this sugya. V'ha'amar Rav Abba bar Zavda amar Rav, Ovel chayiv b'chol hamitzvos amuras b'Torah. After burial, an Ovel is obligated in all mitzvos in the Torah with one exception, chutz minat tefillin shaharei ne'emar bahen pe'er. Now, what greater tirda is that than losing a loved one? You think that someone, no way. If you've lost a loved one, you can't focus on anything. Yet the halacha is not that way. We see this. It's like, Hillel is mechayev es ha'aniyim to learn Torah. The Avel is the mechayev every other tirda in the world. There's no greater tirda. And nevertheless, we see that you're chayev in all mitzvos with the exception of tefillin for a technical reason because of the psukim.
I thought we have to be buried, we do put the phone on.
Not that day. That's a machlokes in the Rishonim between the Balei Tosfos and I want to say the Rambam. I think that's a din by aninus. Let's say if a burial happens at 2 p.m., so that morning you wake up, you're not allowed to put on tefillin because you're an onain. And then after the burial, there's a diun in the Rishonim if you put on tefillin. And halacha l'maisa we paskin that you do not wear tefillin for that day because your day started with a ptur mamish. So the whole day is null and void for that mitzvah. Are you allowed to? Not with a bracha. That's l'chorot. It might even be a bracha lebatal if you take it that far. If the Balei Tosfos are right, and we do hold like them, so that would be the din. That's a din of aninus. And the Meforshim here explain this is only true on the first day when the burial and the death were on the same day. That's actually in the Rishonim, separate sugya altogether. But the Rishonim discuss that whether or not avelus is doraisa. Is avelus a din doraisa or din dorabana? So there, the Meforshim say that avelus is a din doraisa if the death and burial are in the same day. So like in Eretz Yisrael, where the burials are like chick-chock, everything is super rapid. If a person is a mace in the morning, they're buried by afternoon, that day is a din doraisa of avelus, and the rest of the time is all derabanan. Other Rishonim hold that there's no such thing as avelus doraisa, even if the mace is and the mace and the kfar the same day. But nevertheless, in this case, we're only talking about the first day, and we're saying that the avel is going to be held accountable. He has to say Shema that day. So then the guy whose boat is sinking, too bad. Get your stuff together. You gotta be able to say Shema. It says the Gemara, and you're right. It's not just tirda. Hacha tarid tirda de mitzvah. When it comes to the chassan, and we say that the chassan who's marrying a basula, that he's pater from the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema, it's not stam tirda. It's not tirda just in a vacuum. It's tirda de mitzvah. I'm tarud with a mitzvah in the Torah. And because I'm passionate about that mitzvah, and because there's a tirda in accompanying that particular mitzvah, I'm out. I'm pater from Shema that night. So that's acha tarid tirda de mitzvah. But hasam, over there by the case of avelus, tarid tirda de rishus. Unbelievable. What an unbelievably powerful content. Tirda de rishus, to say that, the avelus is done after day one. And you're going to be obligated. Even that day on day one, you're going to have to say Shema that night. If the burial is at 2 p.m., you still have to say Shema that night. Ein tir de gadol nizu. Unbelievable idea. What? So Rashi has a crazy language. We'll learn it. Where is this Rashi? Is it over here on the next page? I think it's on the next page. Yeah, we'll get there. But Rashi, a very powerful Rashi about this very idea, about the need to be in control of one's feelings when it comes even to the world of Avelus. But let's continue here in the meantime. The Gemara says, wait a second, this whole Mari Makom, all of this, the pasuk of Alechlecha v'derech v'shachbecha of Kamecha, that was the pasuk that you brought as a raya to the Mishnah's opening line, that Shluchei Mitzvah are Ptur Mina Sukkah. It asks the Gemara 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, Va'osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah mehacha nafka. We don't learn it from there. We learn it from somewhere else. Mehasam nafka. We learn it from the following brisa and psukim and chumash. Tanya, vayhi anoshim asher hayu tmein lenefesh adam, and they were not able to bring the korban pesach because they were tummy. So says the Gemara, osam anoshim mi hayu. Who is the pasuk speaking about when it says that there were people who couldn't bring the korban? It says the Gemara, no se arono shel Yosef hayu. It was the people who were carrying the bones of Yosef, and they were tamei meis because they were carrying bones of Yosef. And we know this principle that even if it's a small amount, even if it's etzem kiseor, you're going to be tamei. This was a skeleton of a human being, so pasha there's going to be tuma. So that was Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and he says that's what the pasuk meant. Top of Kaf Hey Amud Aleph. Rabbi Kiva Omer no Mishal ve'el Safan hayu. These were the two people who were responsible, Shahayu Oskin ben Nadav ve'avihu, who were taking care of Nadav and Avihu. So then that's why they were tummy. That's what the pasuk is speaking about. So says the Brisa. Hold on one second. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Im no se arono shel Yosef hayu, kfar hayu yicholon l'tayr. Im yishal ve'el tzafan hayu yicholon hayu l'tayr. In both cases, they were able to have enough time to become tahor before the Korban Pesach. How do we know that? Take a look at Rashi, the 5th line of Rashi, first short line. Rashi, Dibur Hamaschil, Im Nose Arono Shel Yosef Umishal Ve'el Tzafan Hayu Cholam Hayu L'Taher. What does Rashi say? Take a look at the math. Shaharei Be'echad B'Nisan Hukama Mishkan. We know that on the 1st of Nisan, that's when the Mishkan was actually built. V'Sheni Lo, on the 2nd day of Nisan, Saraf Elazar Sapara Sheyazu Al Tmei Meis Shebahen Lasos Pischein B'Tahara. Because on day 2 they brought the korban, they brought the para, they brought the para aduma, and all you need is 7 days. So by the time the 9th day of Nisan came around, you're tahor. So it can't be either of these cases that the Brisa recommended, either the case of the ones who were carrying the Aron of Yosef, or the case of Mishael and Elzaphan, who were taking care of Nadav and Avihu. So therefore, on line 5, the Gemara says, you're right, Ela Oskin b'meis mitzvah hayu, they were dealing with a meis mitzvah who needed to be buried. Shechal shvi shelahen liyos be'erev Pesach, and the 7th day of their Tahara process fell out on Erev Pesach. Shne'emar, v'lo yachalu la'asos ha'Pesach v'yom hahu. On that day, they were not able to bring the Korban Pesach. V'yom hahu ein yachol. So what do we see? We have the mitzvah of meis mitzvah, and because we have the mitzvah of meis mitzvah, even if it falls out in such a way where the 7th day of your tumah falls out on Erev Pesach, to the point that you cannot bring the Korban Pesach, you're still obligated to do the meis mitzvah, which means osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah. So the Gemara says, why did you give me v'lechta chaladerechu v'shach b'chalav kumecha? No, we have it from another source already. It seems to be that we have 2 distinct sources, one that's expressed and the other that's implied, but both of whom indicate that there is definitely osek b'mitzvah, pater mina mitzvah. So to this, the Gemara answers with a regular structure that we're familiar with, which is referred to as a tzrichusa. We have tzricha. So it says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down, 10, 12 lines down. Tzricha, we need both mari makomos. We need the mari makom that we just learned about the meis mitzvah, and we need the mari makom that we learned about kriyas shema, that a chassan on the night of his wedding, who's marrying a basula, is going to be pater from shema tzricha. The yashmin hasam, if we were talking about the case of korban pesach, mishum de lo mata zman chiyuv the Pesach, it wasn't yet Pesach when you did the mitzvah. When did you do the meis mitzvah? 7 days before Erev Pesach. You did it on the 7th of Nisan or the 8th of Nisan, depending on how the counting works out. Aval hacha, here in our case of the chassan, the mata zman kriyas shema. What do you do? They're all coinciding perfectly. The chuppah is right before Ma'ariv. What do you want to do? Is it like, it's not like the other case where the mitzvah was prior to the tirda. The mitzvah was 7 days ago with the mace. And now you're stuck 7 days later. You're not even dealing with the mace anymore. But in our case, there's an overlapping of the mitzvah of Shema and the tirda of the chassan. So Eimalo, I might have thought that Pesach is different, tzricha, therefore we had to teach the case of Pesach. V'yashmin and hacha, if we only would have had our first source, that a chassan is pater from the mitzvah of kriyas shema because of the tirda of the mitzvah. So that's mishum deleka kares, because when it comes to that issue of shema, there's only 2 mitzvahs in the Torah that have an isser kares, that are mitzvah saseh, that have an isser kares, and that's bris milah, and that's korban pesach. So since by korban pesach we have a din kares, okay, aval hasam the ikka kares eimalo. I might have thought the halacha was different by kriyas shema because korban pesach is more severe in its consequences. They're both mitzvah saseh, but korban pesach has an isser kares, and kriyas shema doesn't have an isser kares. So eimalo. So therefore tzricha, I needed both of them. So really both mar mikomos are essential. So in short, if you were to say why are shluchei mitzvah p'tur mina mitzvah, so the answer is for 2 different reasons. One is that we learn from Uvalechta Chavadercha V'Shach B'Chav Kumecha, and the other is from the pasuk by the pasuk by Pesach, which is a case of meis mitzvah, and we needed both cases because the cases had different features. Whereas by the chassan, the tirda and the mitzvah happened in the same time, but by Pesach, the tirda was way earlier, it was 7 days earlier, and the mitzvah was 7 days later. So therefore, we needed both Mari Makomos, and that brings us to the line of Gufa, 1/3 of the way down. This will be rapid until near the end of the page. We'll stop 2-3 lines before the end of the page.
That's what you said. So Osek b'mitzvah 7 days before Pesach because making sure that you're not coming being Osek and mitzvah.
The need to bury that person allows you to not bring the Korban Pesach on time. So that's osek the mitzvah, pater mina mitzvah. The one you were osek in was 7 days earlier, but it had a domino effect. It's your tameh now. Your tameh mace for 7 days, even with a paraduma. It's still yazeh, on Revi and Shvi. You still need to become tahor. So there was a 7 day stall after the mitzvah, right? So that was the chiddush here. So we're
one technical question. On
sure.
That. With tumah, isn't it a case of that another person becomes tameh by making another person tahor? Isn't it like a revolving?
That's true by paraduma.
Yeah.
The person who is yazeh will also.
So you're always going to have a situation where somebody's not going to be tahor for korban pesach. So,
but that's like an assumption of every single year. That happens every year that people are tameh. How many people die within Pesach, within a week of Pesach? How many people are sick? How many? It happens every year. It's like a rate of attrition. We can assume in any year, I'm approximating, that 10 to 15% of Klal Yisrael could not bring the Korban Pesach for whatever reason. You have Arelim. There's 100 reasons why people can't bring their B'derech Rechoka, which the Gemara in Pesachim spoke about. They're stuck on a boat. What are you going to do? They're on a boat for a month. The boat there are a lot of boats that were held stuck in the waters for a very long time when COVID hit because nobody wanted to take anybody into their ports. So there were a lot of these kinds of things. Every year that was the case. But you're correct. Yeah, it's just one of the various domino effects of this. So let's go back to a line that we saw of Rav Abba bar Zavda, and we're going to see 3 such lines from him, and then we'll wrap up. Kufa, Amar Rav Abba bar Zavda Amar Rav, Avel Chai b'chol mitzvos ha'amuros b'Torah. Even though a person is be'avelus, he is obligated to keep all of the mitzvos of the Torah. Chutz mitzvillin sheharei ne'amar bohen pe'er. So says the Gemara that his exemption, the one exemption that day, is from the mitzvah of tefillin. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu was speaking to Yechezkel when he was in Avelus, and he said specifically to Yechezkel during Avelus, that you should wear your tefillin. You and only you during your Avelus should be wearing tefillin. But everybody else who's in Avelus, they're going to be pater, and all of the other mitzvahs are going to be required. The Hani Mili, and this exemption that a person is not required to wear tefillin be'avelus, hani mili b'yom rishon. It's only true on the first day. The word v'acharisa in this case referencing the first day is kiyomar, like that bitter day. Only that day is the day when you're pater. And as well, another line from Rav Abba bar Zavda, what does he say? V'amar Rav Abba bar Zavda, Amar Rav, line number 2 of his for the day, Ovel chai b'sukkah. Okay, pshita, I mean, if you're obligated to do every mitzvah under the sun except for tefillin, okay, thank you. I mean, it's a little explicit.
Morning.
Right. What is the
Canceled
definition
out.
of Avel?
What is the definition? Would it be implied from the Gemara that it's a first day Avel? But it doesn't
You're
matter.
not an Avel,
You're an Avel. You're be'avelus, of course you're an Avel.
Michael's right.
What?
It really begins after Yom Tov.
What?
Michael's correct.
That what?
Begins after Yom Tov. It's so, right?
Oh, you're saying about how Yantif interrupts Avelus, you're saying.
Yeah, that's what it's.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. What does see if Rashi here speaks about that? Pshita. There, he doesn't talk about it there. I don't know.
Assumption is Avel b'toch Shiva is what the Gemara is talking about, not anything beyond that.
Yeah.
But you're not an Avel. There's no such thing. That's Michael's question. Yeah.
That's
So if
Agud.
the death takes place during Chol Hamoed,
You're not an Avelus. Avelus doesn't start until the burial. You're not an Onain either, because an Onain is only an Onain to be pater for mitzvahs when you're able to bury someone.
Right.
So until you're able to bury someone, which is, let's call it Yom Tov Sheni Shal, whatever the earliest time is. There's a discussion, can you do a burial on Yom Tov Sheni Shal Galias? Those are shilas, not in poskim today, but they're shilas in conceptual halacha. But still, it's a great question. I have no idea. Excellent question. Anyways, the Gemara says here, without a good answer, but the Gemara says that if a person is be'avelus, he's still chayav in sukkah. It says the Gemara pshita, how can it be that you're teaching me something so obvious? Ma'u detema hoel va'amar Rav Abba bar Zavda. Amar Rav, that mitzdayer is pater min sukkah. So says the Gemara, I might have thought that because Rav Abba bar Zavda Amar Rav taught me a separate halacha, which we'll spend time speaking about at another point, that mitzdayer is pater min sukkah, that in general, if a person is bitzar, because, as Rashi highlights, because of weather or because of the smell of the schach, for whatever reason that draws you out of the sukkah because of mitzdayer, so hainami mitzdayer hu, that this person who's be'avelus is also mitzdayer. If mitzdayer is pater min sukkah, you get to decide that it's only because of the cold and because of the hot and because of the bad smell. No, the person is bitzar for personal reasons. Says the Gemara, and this is a wild line, and we are going to see a very critical Rashi. Kamash malan hanimili tzara dimimela. The only time that we have mitzdar pater min sukkah is when it is tzara dimimela. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is about 8-9 lines from the bottom of the page. Dibur hamaschel tzara dimimela. What is considered to be tzara dimimela? The automatic, natural occurring ones. Sheha sukkah mitzar. So the sukkah is the one that's causing the tzar. And the Rashi says, Kigon chama, otzina, the hot or the cold, osircha bidvarim shesikech bahem, or the smell of that which you used for schach, back in the Gemara. Aval hacha, but here in our case, where there's an avel, ihu dekamitza ir nafshe, he's allowing himself to be bitzar. And then it says the Gemara, just a very, very high level of therapy, says the Gemara, "Iboile li suve daite." He has to create Yishuv Hadas within himself. Take a look at Rashi again. Rashi's 8 lines from the bottom of the page. "Miboile li suve daite, chova alav liyashev daito lemitzvah." Wow, even be'avelus, the halachic standard, even be'avelus, is that you need to be able to create Yishuv Hadas within yourself to properly fulfill a mitzvah. Rain pulls you out of the sukkah. Avelus for a loved one does not. It's an unbelievable standard of emotional control that you need to be in such good control that even if you've lost a loved one and you have a mitzvah upon you, you got to find a way to generate Yishuv Hadas. Really a very, very high level. Okay, let's continue. The Amar Rabbi Ava Barzav the Amar Rab Chasan v'Hashoshvenin v'Chol b'nei HaChuppah P'turin min HaSukkah Kol Shiva. That if there is a chasan, a groom, v'Hashoshvenin, those are his the close friends, v'Chol b'nei HaChuppah, everyone who's involved in the wedding party, they're all exempt from the sukkah for all 7 days. So if someone gets married the day before Sukkot, they're mamish pater. Says the Gemara, my taima mishum debo lemechte, because they have to be mechte, they have to be chad, they have to be very happy. Okay, well, if they have to be very happy, v'leichlu b'sukkah, v'leichlu b'sukkah. I don't understand. So go eat your meals in the sukkah and be happy in the sukkah. Why do you have to be happy in the place where the wedding took place? No, ein simcha ela b'chuppah, because we assume that the chuppah, they built a chuppah somewhere and they would stay there for the whole time of the first week. They would be staying there, and the simcha is only in that place. Okay, but fine. V'leichlu b'sukkah, v'leichlu b'chuppah. Maybe we can separate out. Right? Go eat in the sukkah and then come back to the chuppah place. That's where you're going to be happy. Great, go do that. Ein simcha el b'makom suda. Sorry, you got. It says the Gemara that it has to be that the simcha is b'makom suda. V'le'avdu chuppah b'sukkah. Why doesn't a person just decide to get married inside their sukkah? Then the place where they eat, the place where they get married is all the same place. Abaye Omar mishum yichud. We can't do that. Because we are going to have some concerns about yichud. And Rava Amar mishum tzar chasan. Rava says we're concerned about tzar chasan. So the way that these concerns play out in the poskim is that, let's say the husband goes inside and then a man were to come wish a mazel tov, and the only person in the sukkah is the woman, the new bride. So then you could run into some yichud shilas. That's fascinating. It would have to be under a case where the husband was not supposed to come back, because if it's not a person who's nichnas v'yotz.
Rashi explains they built all their sukkahs out of the way on the roof.
Yeah, Rashi says I saw that Rashi, they built them all on their roof, so it's a little bit still far removed. It doesn't solve the question I'm asking though, which is the chassan has to be more than 9 minutes away from the house. He has to be, because otherwise if he's coming back, or even the risk of him coming back, ruins yichud. So I just asked Rabbi Robinson a shayla about hilchos yichud, whatever it was. The answer was basically, if there's any chance that someone could walk in, then it's not yichud anymore. That's true. So obviously in this case, you have to come up with the ukimta. He went to Target, 8-minute walk each direction. So saying there has to be zero fear that someone could walk in for there to be an Isser Yichud. Okay, fine. So that's his concern. And Tzar Chasen, Rashi says here, Tzar Chasen, it's the 4th line before the end of the page. And Rashi says, Sha'amakom tzaru pasuach. It's a public place. She'ein la'ela shalosh tefan. It says 3 walls. Ubosh l'sachekim kalaso. And he wants to, not in a physically intimate way necessarily, but he wants to be able to let his hair down and to chill with his wife in a way that's comfortable benachas. But really, it's more private than public, and that's not appropriate here. Well, if his chuppah was in the sukkah, then he could. Because then it's all the same place. But if your chuppah was not in the sukkah and your mamish pater, then no, you have no mitzvah of sukkah. You're exempt. So then says the Gemara, I should say maybe that's not true, because we know. I just had those where my brain went. The Machlokes Tosfos and the Rambam about whether or not a woman who's p'tura from any particular mitzvah. So the Rambam was of the opinion that a woman who's p'tura from a mitzvah cannot make a bracha, and the Balei Tosfos, that's how most of us hold, is that if a woman wants to do a mitzvah, say she has man grama, she's allowed and she can make a bracha. So here, I don't know how the exemption works. Is this the, what?
Spartan Paskin, not, by the way.
Spartan Paskin do not make a bracha.
Do not make a
Right. Yeah, that's a Rambam. The Rambam holds that way. And the Ashkenazim are of the opinion of the Balei Tosfos. It's almost a clean cut between Ashkenazim and Sfardim, is that we allow women to make brachos on. Yeah. So anyways, my beinayu, what's the difference between Abaye's answer of the concern of yichud and Rava's answer of tzar chasen, that he feels limited in his ability to kind of be a little bit more comfortable? So the case would be where there are throngs of people. You see, there's a line of 300 people waiting to come wish him mazel tov. Under those circumstances, you don't have any concerns of yichud. According to him, there's no concerns at all. But according to the concern, the second concern, not Abaye's concern, but Rava's concern that it's not really a private enough space, that concern still exists. However, Amar Reb Zera Ana, Achle besukkah v'chadi b'chuppah. So he doesn't agree with the Gemara that we just learned. Reb Zera was of the opinion that you can bifurcate your experiences. You can eat in the sukkah, seemingly chayiv, right? That's implied at least that you'd be chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah. V'chadi, and he would celebrate b'chuppah. V'kol shekein d'chadi liboy d'ka'avid natarte. And all the more so that in my heart, my heart was so happy to ka'avid natarte that I was able to do both. I could be misameach for my kala, I could be misameach for my wedding at the makom chuppah by the meals, but not by the meals. I was able to eat the meals in the sukkah, fulfill there, and then to be chad, to celebrate back wherever the chuppah was. So we see a split in the Gemara between these two things. We're going to stop right here at Tanu Rabbanan on the bottom of Kaf Hamid Beis, and we'll pick up with Kavav tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.